Good evening, everybody. Can you guys hear me loud and clear? Benny, I think you need to put your video on. Mike as well. All right, great. We can see everybody.
Good afternoon. Good evening. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
A very late evening for you, Mike. Thank you for joining us. I know it's 11 p.m. for you over there.
Yeah, that's right. That's okay. I'm a night owl.
Great to have you on the show. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. You were saying we've got 200 people in climbing. That's already more than my usual lectures.
Well, we've got 300 now, actually, both on YouTube.
Wow,
and,
yeah, it's gonna get more later.
Yeah.
Everybody's having dinner now. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Benny, you want to go first?
Yeah. Okay, guys. So before we start with today's session, please welcome Dr. Michael Lee to our show. His time now is, I think, 11 p.m., right? And,
yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, so glad they can join us despite the time. But it's an important session that we want to go through with all our listeners today, because everyone is figuring out currently, which type of business will be able to survive the COVID and also post-COVID, right? And that's why it's timely that we get this discussion going on. But before we do that, I just want to basically share the guys some house rules. Of course, today we have Dr. Michael Lee with us, who is he's the associate professor from the University of Auckland Business School, and he's joining us today to give us his views on what type of business will survive in COVID-19. All right. But before that, of course, we have several rules here. This again is the content of this show is all informational purposes only. It's not. It does not constitute as any investment advice or recommendation to buy or sell anything. Maybe we'll not be talking about this today anyways. But yeah, if you need a professional advice, please do seek a professional advisor or licensed advisor. All right. Now, for those who are still new to us and haven't really access to our equities tracker platform, please do WhatsApp us at 603-8408-2070 to get a free access to our equities tracker platform, where you're able to look at companies' financials historically and also do a lot of research and analysis on that platform. Right? So WhatsApp us at 603-8408-2040.
Benny, just a quick one. On the free trial, we actually have created a new link, which if you go to equitiestracker.com/free, you can get that done as well. So apart from WhatsApping, you can also go to our link, Equities Tracker /free, right? So
equitiestracker.com/free.
Yes, correct.
We just created that page today, right? So like
yeah, we just created it. Yes. Can I also give a shout out to, I know there are some corporate or CEOs who are also tuning in tonight. I'd just like to give a shout out, welcome the members of MBAN, Malaysian Business Angel Network. Right, they are actually an official trade association for all and a governing body for all angel investors and also angel investor clubs in Malaysia as well. Welcome.
Right, welcome to the show. Welcome. Yeah. Right, so for those who are still new with us as well, if you want to get updates on our Investors Copy Time every day at 8 p.m. Of course, today is a special, it's at 7 p.m. Please do like our page and subscribe to our page, follow our page, right? And when you follow our page, make sure the notifications is on so that you are able to get notifications whenever we go live or whenever we post some information on the Facebook page, all right? And we are also on YouTube. If you come to our youtube.com/equities tracker, or you just search Equities Tracker on YouTube, please do subscribe. And once you subscribe there, at least you know that when we go live or when we have any content, new contents, you will get notification as well. All right. So we'll come to our charity.equitiestracker.com later on. Maybe we'll just start first, since everybody is waiting and eager to hear from Dr. Michael Lee. So I'm just going to pass this on to Alvin.
Yeah, I'll also like to, I know for our Muslim viewers, it is Ramadan and you are breaking fast in about 15 minutes. Timing is not fantastic, but we hope that you can eat and also watch us at the same time as well. Shout out also, I think the president of MBAN is also watching as well. So no awesome. Pressure, Mike. Yeah. All right. So over to you, Mike.
Okay, great. Hey, thanks. No pressure, because thank you for Benny for that disclaimer at the front, which keeps me out of trouble as well. As you say, this is an opinion piece that I wrote for the newsroom just before the lockdown, actually, in New Zealand. I saw it coming, and I think a lot of you guys would have seen it coming as well, that this thing was going to affect the economy, the world economy. And so I was fortunate enough to have a little bit of time to think about this. And thank you for inviting me to share my thoughts. Now, some of your readers may probably have read the article, so apologies if this is a bit repetitive, but I will present just one slide, which is that diagram that they might have seen in that article, and I'll talk through it. And I guess the main purpose of today is to receive some of the questions. I know we already had a chat, Alvin, last week, and you guys had some great questions, and so it'll be interesting to see what other questions that we get tonight as a result of this discussion. So I'm going to share a screen.
Yep.
Just bear with me for a second.
So for those who have just joined us, Dr. Michael is actually joining us all the way from New Zealand, Auckland. It's actually 11 p.m. his time, right? So
yeah. Hang on, I want to share, apologies, I want to share the other screen. So I'm going to stop that and go over here. Okay, this is better. Okay, there we go. Right. Okay. So I'm looking at my other screen now, so apologies for not looking directly at you. Right, so as you know, you've read the article. I feel like I'm talking to my students who sometimes don't read the article, and so they find my lectures far more informative than your audience who have read the articles and probably are just thinking, why is he repeating himself again? But for the benefit of you that are having your dinner, you can have dinner and a show here. So you should see on your screen, I hope you do, a grid. And the first, I guess, dimension I talked about in the article was location. So with all businesses, pre or post or even during COVID, obviously, time and place are two very important aspects of any business. And so on one continuum, I have location dependency and location independence. Then on the other grid, we have synchronicity, or it's just a fancy word for time. And so, as I mentioned, any business can be thought of in terms of the time and place that the business must occur in conjunction with the stakeholders that are involved with it. So what we're currently seeing right now, all those businesses that are taking a dive are those that are heavily location dependent and heavily synchronous, or they're time dependent. And so some examples I have there are your concerts, your sporting events. Obviously, restaurants are taking a big hit, especially in New Zealand. We were in level 4, so that meant no restaurants were allowed to open. I understand the case is similar in Malaysia, but you guys are still allowed takeaways. We were only recently allowed takeaways. But the ones that you have heard of really suffering are those sporting events and those concerts, the theaters, and also conferences, international conferences. A lot of the hospitality and tourism obviously is damaged, because all those businesses rely on people and the suppliers and customers being in the same place, location dependent, and the same time, synchronous service. And these are the ones that are taking a dive. Now, a lot of businesses that are in this section are now scrambling, or they have been scrambling for the last 5 weeks now, to pivot in either direction. And that certainly is my, I guess, opinion or advice as a brand strategist, is that if you can, now is the time, or you should have, I guess, been thinking about that a month ago, about which way you can best pivot to become a little bit more able. And so some businesses that are surviving COVID and will hopefully then get out of the other side of this thing in not so bad shape are those businesses that have gone from location dependent and synchronous to asynchronous. So they've managed to pivot along the time axis, right? And so when you pivot along the time axis, that means you can spread out the people, the suppliers, as well as the other stakeholders. And when you can spread people out, you also stop the transmission of the virus, right? So that's, I guess, the number one concern right now. But moving beyond the virus, simply by becoming less time dependent, or more asynchronous, you're actually doing a favor for your business in the long term, because you're making yourself more convenient to your customers and your stakeholders, right? And the examples I have here are your self-service stations, which are very common all over the world. And so it's still a location dependent business, because you need to go there to get the gas, the petrol for your vehicle, but you don't need anyone else there at the same time as you, right? So you show up in your car, you do everything automatically, and then you can get the product that you want without contacting another person. And so that's great for business because it's convenient for the customer, but it's also, in this day and age, great for hygiene and physical distancing of people. The other example I have there is independent domestic tourism. So the tourism industry is obviously taking a hit because all the borders are shut. So for New Zealand anyway, it's likely that the majority of our tourism for the next 18 months will be independent domestic tourism. And the reason why that is you still need the location, because you still need to go and, you know, be at that place, but you can organize it in a way that minimizes the chance of you crossing the path with another person, or at least minimizes the need for a tour guide or some sort of instructor to be there at the same time. So most of the tourism businesses that have really suffered are those that require people to be in the same place in the same time. So the cruise industry is a really good example of something that's really been hit hard. You have a lot of people in the same place with a lot of other people at the same time in the same place on a boat, and that's why they're getting sick. Right? If the tourism industry, and this probably applies to Malaysia as well, where there's a lot of, you know, natural wonders, you can get people going to those places and do so in a way that they can experience nature, you know, in a smaller group, or at least spread out within their own bubbles. And that allows that business to thrive, well, not thrive, but and that allows it to survive. The other way you can pivot is to go in a location independent fashion. So the examples I have here, which many people are familiar with, are your live streaming services, you know, online counseling, e-coaching, and takeaways is a good example. So Uber Eats is a good example of a business that is still synchronous. So the cook, the chef, and the customer still need to be, you know, operating within the same time zone. The chef has to be there to receive the order of the customer, but they never see each other, right? It's a location. Oh, sorry. There we go. It's a location independent sort of offering. The restaurant is still there, but the customer never needs to go there. And so therefore you spread out the contact or the ability for the virus to transmit. Now, once again, beyond COVID, becoming more location independent is obviously a very good move anyway for any business, right? And so, you know, if we look at Amazon, this is a business model that's been built, you know, by being location independent and asynchronous, right? And so we move on to the businesses that will thrive. So we have those that will dive, those that will survive, and those that will thrive. And as I was saying, you know, your online retail like Amazon or eBay or Alibaba, they are asynchronous. They don't rely on people being in the same time, and they're definitely location independent. Now, my own experience working in the tertiary education sector, we've gone from down here, which is your location dependent synchronous service. I have to be there at the same time as my, you know, 100, 200 students. And we very quickly had to pivot over here to, you know, a thrive, to try and thrive. And that means pre-recorded lectures, remote assessments, et cetera, et cetera. And this means that my students can now stream me, you know, just like they stream Netflix, and they don't have to leave the comfort of their couch. And so many businesses are, you know, pivoting that way and getting to this point. And the thing is, even before COVID happened, these were the businesses that your investors are probably noticing are the ones that are going to be doing well, because they are the most convenient businesses, regardless of whether there's a pandemic or not. But now that we know that pandemics are a big deal and they affect the economy, and I don't think anyone's, you know, kidding themselves if they think that this is the only pandemic that will ever happen. If it happens again, then this is where you want to be, because, you know, the virus has kind of evolved in a way that has taken advantage of humans doing business by being in the same time in the same place. So in a way, it's kind of taken the thing that's driven our capitalism, and that's why it's such a successful virus. It's basically doing business the way we've been doing business for many years. And so we need to evolve past that. We need to sort of outsmart the virus by spreading ourselves out time-wise or location-wise, or ideally both, or at least having the option to do so should we need to react quickly in the future. So that's pretty much a quick rundown of my presentation. I'll send the link to the, well, you guys probably have the link to the article if people want to read a little bit more in depth at their own pace. But right now, I'd love to sort of take on some questions. Do you want me to stop sharing screen or keep this on?
Yeah, you can keep this on.
Okay.
Yeah. Alvin, you are on mute. Yeah, okay.
All right, you can keep this on. Yeah.
Okay, so guys, if you have any questions right now for Dr. Mike, you can just type it on the comment section right now. Even though if it's got to do with some of the Malaysian businesses, because I think this COVID thing has also accelerated the digitalization of things. I mean, even at Equity Striker, we are moving towards that digitalization of our products and services. But it was actually a longer term plan, but everything just got accelerated. Right.
Yeah. COVID has definitely, it's the same in New Zealand. It's been a catalyst. It's been the wake up call that a lot of businesses were umming and ahhing about whether they go online or digitize their business or automate. And this has really been the catalyst that's pushed them over the edge and said, no, I better do it now. Otherwise I go bankrupt.
Yeah, and everybody's also, I mean, even the retail business, especially supermarkets, right, that have actually embarked into online deliveries and online ordering. I think they are the ones who currently survive. We are seeing quite a number of smaller supermarkets, all these convenience stores, which are struggling right now, because they don't have that delivery service. But apparently, the big names that has this delivery, their business has actually gone up.
They're thriving, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So from other businesses, like for example, I mean, yeah, everyone should go into to go to that thriving part of the metrics that you have just shown us, right? Restaurants, for example. I think there are some restaurants that did quite well as well. But what about businesses that, I mean, they already have restaurants, but they are, currently we have like Grab services and so on and so forth. Do you think that they will be better off doing their own delivery, or should they, rely on these delivery services that's already available currently?
Yeah, that's funny because, in New Zealand, we have, Uber Eats, just like you guys do as well. And because of the looming, recession and everyone's worried about local businesses going bankrupt because they've had, 5 to 6 weeks of no income. There's actually been a bit of a push away from Uber Eats because of the commission that they take from the local businesses. And so what the government's encouraging people to do is actually go and do a click and collect sort of service to support the local businesses rather than getting Uber Eats and having the business pay a commission to quite a large commission to the company Uber Eats. And so that's an interesting example of how, I guess, the government wants to spread the love in a way to make sure that we support the businesses as much as possible rather than having a percentage of that money go to the delivery. And so that's the unpredictable thing, is how governments, how people, how businesses will react. Obviously, if you're a business and you're desperate for customers, then a company like Uber Eats or an equivalent, if that's able to get you the scale that you need, then you'd be an idiot to decline. But where possible, at least in New Zealand, we've been encouraged to go directly to that business and do a click and collect sort of service.
Right.
So Mike, we have a few questions here that are starting to roll in. It's a great framework, and maybe just for the viewers, I found this very interesting, and I contacted Dr. Mike here, was because we're gonna find pre-COVID, you're gonna have a lot of businesses that already fit this, right? As an investor, why this framework is a good framework to start thinking is, we want to know if those guys in the dive, whether they're going to survive or thrive, depending on their business strategy going forward, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh yeah, sorry to interrupt.
Sorry.
No, I was just saying that you're right. I mean, with investing, I mean, you guys are the experts here, but I suspect that the ones that are already thriving are already, you know, too expensive to invest in because they've done so well. So you want to find the people that are able to pivot into the survive, or maybe go straight to thrive. But obviously, it's cheaper to get them when they're diving, and hope that their strategy is going to pivot quickly. Yeah, that's a good observation.
That's precisely what I was thinking. So actually, you know, using your model, we're thinking of putting stocks into each of these quadrants, right? But you know, I've asked you this before, and I know we're seeing some questions rolling in. So you know, where would you put manufacturing services in this sort of environment? You know, because in Malaysia we have quite a fair bit of manufacturing companies. Where because they are location dependent, but are they also asynchronous or synchronous, you know, and what should they do if you're a manufacturer today?
Yeah, that's a great question, Alvin. And right now, a traditional manufacturer is very much in that red category of dive, because they are location dependent, as you mentioned, and synchronous, right? They need factory workers to show up at the same time in the same place. In fact, the entire industrial revolution has been built around location dependent synchronous services. And that's, you know, that's also the same situation that a virus does very well in. A lot of people in the same time in the same place. So if you're a manufacturer, then one thing you can do is the main thing you can do is to pivot on the time axis, so the synchronicity axis, and move yourself upwards into the self-service station, that sort of category. So up here in the asynchronous section, because you're never going to get rid of the location dependency. Well, in the future, you might be able to do it when 3D printing becomes a thing, like a cost-effective way of getting goods out to the people without having them going to a manufacturer. But for this point in time, you can't move the factory, but you can spread out the people, or you could just replace the people with automation. And so if you can automate, which, you know, many manufacturers are doing anyway, then that obviously reduces the reliance on people, and the virus can't spread if you have less people in the factory. And so I think for manufacturers, the easiest way is to pivot upwards and organize your time system so you have less people present at the same place, because they have to be at the same place. Or failing that, you know, if you've got more capital, you can invest in automation, and then that takes the people completely out of the equation, which is probably not a great thing to hear if you're a factory worker. But you know, as I think we chatted about this last week, Alvin, and I was saying, you know, the time for cheap labor, at least in Asia, is nearly over, and the only continent left really for cheap labor is Africa. And you know, the Chinese companies are definitely aware of that, heading that way. But a lot of, you know, I guess as a general economic strategy for the Malaysian government, I'm sure they are actually wanting people to upskill and move away from the low paying labor jobs into the type of jobs that design the automation that can be then you know, implemented into these factories for manufacturing.
Yep. Thanks for that. Yeah, so we have a question here from YouTube. Alan Lim, he's saying, do you have some sort of, or would you have any idea on some sort of methodology that can allow a business to pivot? How would if I'm a business owner, how would I move from dive to survive, or maybe to thrive? Because you know, I think companies, some CEOs or some companies are kind of stuck. They're like, you know, where do I go now, right?
Yeah, so in the article, I ask a couple of questions for managers or CEOs to ask themselves. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it involves breaking down your business model and thinking critically about how important or how taken for granted is the idea that you need to be in the same time as your customer or that you need to be in the same place as your customer? And so it sounds like a pretty basic question to ask, but we rarely actually ask that question, because when things are going well, you don't want to change anything. And when things are going badly, you scramble and panic, right? But if you take the time to really think, okay, how is my current business model, and how important is this idea of being in the same time and same place as my customer? And so, and I'll give it a personal example, because the university, we've always taken for granted that the only way to have an university education is to be in the same time in the same place as the students, right? Even though we know correspondence schools are happening, we know that MOOCs, your massive online courses are happening, but we've kind of hidden our heads in the sand and just assumed, taken for granted that that students want to be in the same time and place as each other, and as well as the lecturer. But then COVID happens, and then we had to literally in 2 or 3 days move from that location-dependent synchronous service to the complete opposite in order to continue thriving. And so what we're finding is that we don't have to be in the same time, and we don't have to be in the same place, especially now with the internet. And so I think of a lot of businesses probably have been thinking at a subconscious level or an intuitive level about this issue of time and place already. Certainly the ones that have had to pivot very, very quickly and go to a delivery service, or to work out their staff rostering to spread people out. So they're already thinking that way. And so as a methodology, just asking those 2 simple questions is a very good place to start. How important is it that we're at the same time as our stakeholders, and how important is it that we need to be in the same place? And then you'll find that it'll be easier to pivot one way or the other first, rather than trying to do both at the same time. And depending on what business you are in, and depending on your customers' needs, you might find that it's easier. It will be easier to go one way or the other.
Right. Actually, I have a follow-up question on this. This is from Kwong Seong Lim from Facebook. So he's asking, so I'm just going to summarize it. So he's asking, if a lot of businesses move from dive to survive or thrive, what do you foresee happening to the labor market in the short term or longer term? Because you're in education, right? And you're gearing students up for the workforce. How would this whole labor market change? Would you give it? Would you be able to give us an idea?
Yeah, I think people will have to, I guess, pivot as well. It's really hard to predict where, but if you don't have people in a factory because you've automated the task, then one, I guess, pessimistic outlook is that you just have more unemployment, right? But then it's really difficult to predict, because Amazon, for example, had to hire like 100,000 new people, because you still need people to work on in the factory behind the scenes as well, fulfilling orders and loading stuff and designing stuff and creating. So even if you don't have people in the factory making the shoes, you still need people designing the machines, designing the shoes, fixing the machines, servicing the machines, and then you might need people delivering the shoes or working in some other way. So even though no one can say what will happen to the labor force, there is, I guess, typically a trend in, that you just notice all over the world in developing countries, that, it starts off as a cheap labor market. And then as the companies invest there, the wealth of the population goes up, and then they don't want to work in those labor situations anymore. And they invest in education, and they have their kids do something that they don't need to do. And then the cheap labor has to move elsewhere. And as I mentioned earlier on, there's only really one continent left for that, and that's Africa. So I guess your investors can look at it as one, that's a potential investment opportunity. But there's also, I guess, the other idea that, maybe cheap labor is just something that's going to be more and more sort of, I guess, replaced. And it is often those low skilled jobs that end up being replaced by machines anyway.
Yeah, yeah. Benny, you got something?
Yeah, I'm actually asking if for a business that really requires very high or location dependent and also synchronous service. Because I'm actually asking this on behalf of my friend who actually owns a pub, and you know, you can't take away a draft beer, or you know, it doesn't taste the same, and because it's also a social thing, right? People don't go to the pubs and you know, to socialize and meet friends and so on and so forth. So I mean, he has been thinking, right? I mean, how can he digitize his business? And of course, we have all the restaurants that are able to deliver food, but how do you actually deliver drinks, right? So he's trying to struggle. I mean, he's still struggling on what to do with his business right now. So I'm not sure we have any examples in New Zealand where we have this kind of businesses that go to into the survival mode or even thrive. Do you have any examples there?
The closest example where you have a social element with this community idea, where it's a business built around a group of people that like hanging out together and partaking in the same activity, is gyms, right? So fitness clubs. And that's very similar to a pub where it's the social act of going there, working out with your friends and whatever, and you can't really deliver that, right? So what we see a lot of gyms have done, and they were already doing this before COVID, but a lot of them really, it was the catalyst that forced them to do it now, was they've gone from a location-dependent synchronous service as a gym, and they've pivoted over here, and they've done a lot of live streaming group fitness activity. And so it's not the same, but it allows them to maintain their membership community, and it allows them to be at least at the same time, spending the same time doing the fitness, but in a location independent fashion, working out at home. And so with a pub, even though, you know, it's not quite the same because you've got the draft that you need to enjoy, there is, I think I've heard somewhere that a group of guys around, and this might be something that's just happening anywhere, is they're having they're having their usual happy hour, but they're doing so at home. So they stream each other and they share a beer on Zoom, and they chat about stuff and support each other and all that. And so as a pub, you already have a community of Facebook followers or you know, some sort of social media connection with them already. And so until COVID sort of, you know, blows over, or at least the alert levels lower so that we can go to the pub again, that's probably the closest thing you can have is to pivot this way, and at least spend time together in different places. Because I guess if you went this way, it would be quite that's basically, you know, going to the pub one person at a time, which is not much fun. So I think for a business like a pub or a gym, it's more useful to come over this way. Although you actually do have gyms up here where these are your 24/7 swipe in, swipe out sort of gyms, right? Where there's actually very few people, and because it's 24/7, people can swipe themselves in, do the workout and leave, and they rarely sort of cross another person. And so you can go either way. With the pub though, I think this way for now, just to keep that community alive, to let them know what's happening with the business, and so that because part of the appeal of your local pub is that you've got that relationship. And so we're finding that you can still maintain a relationship if you pivot this way in the comfort of your own home, but it is about being present with the other people you care about. And so if they can keep that going, then when the lockdown stops or when the alert level reduces, then people will want to go back and actually catch up in person again, right? And so they can come back here because being in the same time and same place is actually a core advantage. It's the sustainable competitive advantage of a pub. And so for the time being, they just have to be happy with half that advantage, and then hopefully they can bring people back afterwards.
Right.
So Mike, so one of the things that it's pretty obvious that will dive is location dependent and synchronous service like an airline, right? So everyone needs to be at the airport at the same time to get on the same plane, to go to the same destination and land at the same airport. And you know, the whole cycle goes through, right? Yeah. What do you think is going to happen to airlines?
Yeah, I mean, the hardest hit industries are travel and hospitality, right? Because they all involve the things that you spoke about, same time and same place. heavily location dependent. You can't really, I mean, over here, I've got VR, virtual reality tourism, but you know, who are we kidding? It's not really the same, right? I mean, you have some really lazy people that will say they've seen the Taj Mahal through their goggles, but really you need to get on a plane and go to India, right? And then be in that same space with like 1,000 other people. And so tourism and hospitality have really taken a hit. You know, you can, some of the stuff with the tourism, you can spread out, but really it is always going to be location dependent. With airlines, that's really tricky, because, you know, maybe in the future when we can all afford personal drones that can actually fly us, you know, like a personal helicopter to some place, that might be handy. But for the time being, yeah, airlines definitely need people to be in the same time and same place, and that's why they're suffering so much during this this pandemic. I don't know how Malaysian Airlines is going, but you know, Air New Zealand
not very well, I can tell you.
Yeah, yeah, it's the same with Air New Zealand, right? So they're suffering as well because well, you can't travel, and so the government has to do some bailing out, and that really is the only option, it seems, to maintain the business viability of some of these airlines. And those that are private enterprises, obviously, they don't have the government to bail them out. They're the ones that will dive. Now, for your investors, that could be an opportunity, because I mean, it's a very risky move, right? Because you don't know what the demand will be for air travel once the pandemic ends, and what will end it. Will it be, you know, vaccines or treatment or both, or some sort of quarantine? And so there's a big question mark about how much air travel we will all be doing in the future. Definitely, there won't be much of it happening in the next 18 months. But, you know, beyond that, will we get back up to that same level of air travel? Because I guess the other problem is, once we figure out, once we have all these businesses and all these customers thinking about, you know, how important is it that I be in the same time and place as the businesses I want to do business with, you might find that, you know, things like conference travel become a thing of the past, right? Because all of a sudden we're doing virtual conferences now, we're doing Zoom conferences, and we find that we don't need to be spending thousands of dollars to go to some place to sit in a room with these people to talk about the stuff we could talk about on Zoom. And so that in itself will affect the airline industry long term, you know, well after this pandemic is finished. The way we work, the habits of our travel habits in general will change. And so airlines, I think, yeah, that's a big one, because even before the pandemic, there was already, you know, a little bit of criticism in terms of, you know, climate change and fossil fuels and the necessity of all the travel we actually do. So that will be a big question mark across the airline industry.
Yeah. Mike, do you want to maybe stop your share screen first, and then because I think they can only see one person at a time, so then at least we get more. Yeah, thanks for that. So I have so what would you say, you know, I think there are a lot of business owners that are possibly on this live stream and listening in, it's sort of how do they move it to be asynchronous, or how do they move it to be location independent, right? What sort of maybe mindset that what would you think? What are your thoughts?
Well, definitely, I guess a growth mindset, because you're going to have to change in one direction or the other, and preferably both. And so that really comes down to questioning, once again, your business model and how important, because a lot of us take for granted this idea that we have to work, 9 to 5, we have to drive somewhere, sit in an office, or go to a factory, or go to a store between these certain set times of 8 in the morning till 6 in the evening, or whatever it is, and then we get in the car and drive back home. So really thinking about how flexible you can be in terms of time, and then thinking about how flexible you can be in terms of space or place. I think you have to have an inquisitive mindset to really, and a critical mindset to really take apart your business model and think what things have we been doing that are business as usual for the last 10-20 years that we can really sort of think about doing differently now in terms of time and space. And you'll be surprised. I mean, apart from a couple of the businesses that we've talked about, like airlines is a good example of one that's very difficult to pivot in either direction. I think a lot of businesses do have that ability to, either go up or go across or go diagonally towards the thrive. Restaurants have pivoted very well. So they've become, location independent, even though they still rely on the same time experience, and other services have managed to go the other way. So it's I guess thinking along those lines, whether there's a pandemic or not, is always going to be good, because those businesses that have done really well, like Netflix is a great example. That happened way before any pandemic happened, but it was already starting to replace traditional TV media because it is so convenient for customers, because it's asynchronous and it's location independent. So any businesses that is like that or moving that way are going to be more convenient for the customer. And we all know that if you're more convenient for the customer, you do better.
Yeah, you're right. So we have a suggestion here. This is from Chaufa. He's saying that would it be possible to add another axis to the asynchronous and location dependent or independent, and have an innovation dimension as well? So because ultimately, I think what we're talking about is how do you innovate yourself to move, or why the growth and innovation mindset is very important to move yourself into any of these four quadrants, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I haven't thought about it. It's always difficult to add a third dimension to something like this without going 3D, and then you've got more than just 4 extra boxes. I think innovation is definitely a factor that will help with the pivoting of these businesses, either up or across, because innovation means doing things differently. And so thinking about time and your business model differently, or thinking about place and your business model differently, that is all innovation. It's, going from a traditional gym to a live stream at home group fitness experience, that was innovating for the time, at that time for the gyms, because people thought you paid for a membership and you went to this place and then you worked out and then you went home. But now people are working out at home, right? And the gyms that innovated early and did that are now the ones that are doing well, or at least not doing badly. Innovations such as Uber Eats and other home sort of meal delivery systems enabled a lot of restaurants to survive. So I do definitely agree that innovation is an important part, or is a critical factor in allowing businesses to pivot. I don't know if it would fit as an axis though. I guess if you had an axis, it would sorry, I'm not sharing the screen. Hang on, I'll just do it very quickly. It would be, hang on. So if you had an axis of innovation, it would be low innovation here, and it will probably be high innovation there, and it will be a diagonal arrow like that. But that doesn't really take into account what's happening here, because you still need innovation to go up and then go across as well. Yeah.
True. Benny, you got something?
Yeah. So I mean, like a country like Malaysia, because we are still heavily depending on agriculture. Palm oil being one of our major product, right? And of course, this whole health crisis is not just a health crisis, but it also created an economic crisis, right? And we also have now problem with demand. Right? It's just that people are not. Same thing like cars, you also have rubber. People are not selling cars, there's no rubber to produce tires, right? So if because this is still our main economy in Malaysia. So how do you think that, in order for this really very location dependent and also synchronous, right? How can they pivot, right? Moving towards whether it's to survive or to try.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. That's more of a long-term question. I mean, I designed this grid to sort of take into account sort of the immediate things that businesses needed to think about to survive COVID and future pandemics, right? But the question you raise is one about demand. And so that's a very different type of situation, because even if you have a business that can pivot and go from dive to thrive, if there's no demand there, that's a whole other problem that goes beyond time and place. So if people can't afford your service or your product, even though you can deliver it to them without them being in the same time and place for you, if they don't demand it, then you've got a different problem. And that's a much bigger problem that we probably can't solve with this immediate grid, because this was designed for reacting to COVID. But with agriculture in the current, if we take demand out of the question, obviously agriculture is always going to be quite location dependent. But similar to manufacturing, we see a lot of innovation happening in agriculture that is automating the process. So you don't actually need that many people anymore to run a successful agriculture. Back in the old days, you needed a lot of people picking stuff with their hands and all that. And now you get it to a certain degree, but that is slowly or quite quickly being automated. And so the pivot we see in agriculture is one that goes from synchronous to asynchronous. So people don't need to be there all the time anymore. You still need the land, obviously, because you're growing stuff. The other thing about, palm and rubber demand falling because of a global recession or something like that, or people not buying cars, or even, God forbid, people decide they only need one car per family instead of two because they can work from home now, right? And they don't need to sit in traffic. That is a much bigger problem that I guess you solve one problem by making businesses more location independent, but then you might create another problem on a different scale in terms of demand for products that are now obsolete.
Right. So further to this question, there's someone actually question from Philip, right? One of the things that, because Malaysia has a lot of small and medium enterprises, small businesses, and right now, I think the one that is struggling most are these small and medium enterprises, right? Because to just keep their business afloat, do you think that, after this crisis, or, even after, I don't know how long it's going to take, but do you think that there'll be a consolidation, right, among companies where smaller boys will probably be eaten by bigger boys? People are worried right now.
They are worried. It's the same as New Zealand. So 90% of our businesses are SMEs as well. And we also have obviously a large agricultural sort of sector as well, similar to Malaysia. So I think, I don't know what's happening in Malaysia, but in New Zealand, there's been a massive government, bailout of small to medium enterprises. So a wage subsidy scheme to try and keep people employed that work for businesses, but also to try and supplement any income that may have been lost because of the COVID pandemic. And so that's really built around a social welfare sort of system. Failing that, I guess you're right in that the businesses that dive will disappear, and then larger companies, more successful ones, the ones that are thriving, or even the ones that are surviving, might be in a position to merge or take over, possibly. So that is definitely a possibility that can happen when you get any sort of economic chaos.
Right.
So Mike, so we have a couple of questions here regarding clinics or doctors, right?
Yeah.
Where, I mean, because right now, obviously, it's location dependent and it's synchronous, right? Where are you seeing where's the future of medicine or doctors?
I would say it's easier for them to pivot towards the location independent direction initially for initial consults and I guess remote diagnosis of symptoms that can be visibly seen through Zoom. Even now it's happening where we have because of the alert levels we're in, patients are doing a lot of Zoom consults with health practitioners through Doxy or sometimes through Zoom. And so that we're seeing that's a pivot towards the location independent axis. it's a live streaming service essentially, right? Because the doctor still needs to be there to talk to the patient, but they don't need to be in the same place. So they just need to be in the same time. And then as AI, improves, you could potentially see a pivot upwards where a person goes to a clinic, steps into an X-ray machine, for example, and pushes a button, and they get the scan, and then they get the report, which then can be emailed to their doctor, and then they can have an appointment remotely by Zoom once again or something, right? So it could become a self-service station, self-service health station, perhaps, right? So that could happen. I mean, and that sort of, so these technologies either, I mean, currently the location independency one is the one that's easier to do because we have, virtual conferencing software available already. And so we already see in very remote locations where doctors will be, rather than flying the doctor in, you just, have some sort of internet connection and the doctor can actually do quite a lot of the things that they need to do virtually. And then you'll have the situations where you definitely need to be in the same time and place, like someone gets, stabbed and you need to physically do something. But even with that, we have, with 5G technology and all that sort of stuff, I don't know if you guys get the same ads we do, but we have the Vodafone ad. Have you guys seen? There's a Vodafone ad where there's a vet in Korea or Japan doing surgery on a border collie in New Zealand or something through 5G technology and operating the machinery remotely. So that sort of stuff can happen as well. And so for medical technology, it can go either way, which is good because that means you can get health service out to people, wherever they may be, without endangering the doctor or inconveniencing anyone. I know the military are starting to use drones for in-field medical assessments of fallen soldiers, where it's too dangerous to send a medic in, they can send a drone in, and using the high-resolution camera, they can detect whether, if there's a pulse. So whether it's, they need to send someone in or if the person's dead because there's no pulse in it, then they can move on to someone else. And we're also thinking in New Zealand of using drones to drop life-saving life preserves to people that are, in the ocean, rather than having a lifeguard swim out. And so you see, there is technologies to I guess, pivot medical and rescue services in either direction.
Benny, you had something?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things they put on the Thrive is the virtual reality business, right? And of course, I mean, because people sometimes can get fed up with going through screen like Zoom and you don't really get good interaction. So I'm talking about where you need social interaction, right?
Yeah.
When you talk about virtual reality, it just occurred to me when I was watching the movie Real Player One. I'm not sure whether you watched the movie.
Yeah, I've seen it.
And it's so. Do you think that the virtual reality landscape will probably kick off further? Because at one stage we were talking about VR, but then it quieted down because But do you think if this the virtual reality realm will be even be expanded further?
Yeah, that's a hard one because the technology right now, as good as it is, still isn't the same as being somewhere. And so in my grid, I talked about how virtual reality tourism, if that was a thing, then that could it would be good because then you could experience these places without having to be in the same time and place as a bunch of other people. But at this stage, it's just not the same, is it? And I guess this is where we come to the crux of sort of authenticity and what people think is real versus just virtual reality. And yeah, the technology right now is not quite there, I think. There might be other ways of using virtual reality for, like, say, maybe conference calls or even the education sector. Instead pretending to do surgery at medical school through VR versus having to operate on a real person. That sort of stuff is obviously very useful. But when it comes to the social experience of going to, Machu Picchu or the Great Wall of China or whatever it might be, it's just not the same, is it? If you just do it through VR. Yeah, so I think it's still a way away before we get to that point, like in, you know, the Matrix or in Real Player One, where it's almost the real thing. But at this stage, I don't think it's there yet.
Yeah, I hope we don't get to the point of going to Matrix, right?
Yeah.
I think I saw some questions like what or how should startups pivot, and we also had some comments here on Facebook, right? Melissa is saying that it almost seems that the way forward is for a business to occupy multiple quadrants, and ultimately, you know, the one where it's location dependent and it is synchronous. It's almost it almost can be a non-essential, right? As much as we can make it a non-essential, businesses will have a better chance, right?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I guess we haven't had a chance to talk about how each of these quadrants aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. So if we think about your supermarkets, right, they're very successfully operating at least across two of those quadrants. They've got the online delivery. They also have the click and collect option, right, where it's location dependent, but it's asynchronous. So you click and you collect by yourself. And then they've got the traditional supermarket. So it's the same supermarket and they're operating across at least three of those quadrants, right? You can go to the same place and time as the supermarket like everyone else. And you can click and collect. So you do that by yourself at a time of your convenience, or you can order it midnight and have it delivered the next day at another time. So that's asynchronous and location independent. And so, yeah, so Melissa is correct that, you know, a good business can occupy multiple parts of that quadrant, because then you have the flexibility to pivot in any direction at any point. But of course, for each of those quadrants, you're going to need a different toolbox, right, or a different set of human resources or operational considerations. And so often it's only the really big companies that are able to do that, like the supermarkets that we see. For a small business, it might be very difficult to have the capital overheads of a big physical retail presence, but at the same time have some sort of, you know, factory or warehouse where they can service the majority of their online purchases. So that is more difficult for startups. But I do agree that, you know, it's not that you have to pick one quadrant or another. If you have the capacity and the ability to occupy multiple quadrants, then you will be more flexible in this pandemic and in future pandemics. But you'll also be able to offer different service experiences for different customers, because some people will want, in fact, I think a lot of people are looking forward to actually going back to a normal supermarket or shopping mall and actually seeing other people and being in a crowd a little bit, right?
Yeah. I think I think really maybe you know, the end solution is not to have just being in one quadrant, but really but I think what is happening and what makes most business owners nervous right now is because a lot of their expenses right now are location dependent and synchronous. So a lot of resources have been poured into that area.
Yeah.
And they're thinking, how do I sustain this while trying to pivot to another quadrant, right? But I guess the ultimate, you know, answer would be you can't, right? So you have to really pick and choose where you deploy those resources and whether your existing resources is actually applicable, like what you said, to the other segments, right?
Yeah. So yeah, that's absolutely right. So if you're locked in to some sort of long-term lease because you're location dependent, and you have right now a store that's being charged rent for it's a sunk cost now, right? There's nothing you can do with that. You could still be operating your business virtually and delivering goods using courier services. So you still have a fully functional business for all intents and purposes that is asynchronous and location independent. But you have the sunk cost of your location dependent capital overhead. And so that is a problem. That's probably what is hurting a lot of these smaller businesses. They don't have that you know, amount of cash or liquidity that can help them you know, survive the next couple of months. And so, you know, in New Zealand anyway, there's been a bit of talk about, you know, mortgage holidays or rent freezes just to, you know, for the time being, while businesses are struggling, that they're not having to pay extra expenses as well. But the problem with all those solutions is, unless at the end of the day the World Bank is willing to wipe the last year of interest away from all their various deposits, you still end up paying for the mortgage at some point. And so that's a problem. And I guess a lot of these businesses are probably now thinking, instead of taking that lease out on that shop, we probably should have thought, could we have done this business in a location independent manner from the very beginning, right?
Yeah. Yeah, before we go any further, Dr. Michael, we just have to do a small interruption over here, a small intermission. So because we want to basically share with the audience here what we actually have in our investors copy time as well. So guys, just keep watching, because we're going to have another 2 or 3 more questions for Dr. Michael Lee before we get him off, because it's already midnight now in Auckland. Right? So please don't bear with us for a while, right? Yeah, for those who just joined us who have not, know about us, we are actually running this charity drive where we are actually providing an online education for investments to anyone who wants it for free. And all you need to do is basically to make a charity or do a charity to any charity organization that you want to donate to. And just go to charity.equitytracker.com to register for our online courses. This is where we have about 40 hours of videos, and where Alvin and I will also be in that online campus. So like, Dr. Michael Lee has mentioned, right, it's a new thing now that we got to meet you online instead of going to the universities. So this is where you can meet us online every week, once an hour. So join us in our ET Online campus. Just go to charity.equitytracker.com, right? All you need to do is to do a minimum 100 ringgit donation, that's all. And you can bring 3 friends to join the online campus. All right. So far we have raised about 138. Not we have raised. You guys who have participated have donated about 138, right, 1,000 ringgit currently since we started the MCO, which is about 40 days ago. So congratulations and thank you for those who have actually joined and participate in this movement. All right. So please share this to your friends, and hopefully they too be able to benefit from learning about investments online, and also to be able to donate to a charity and people who need it more. All right. And one more thing that we want to also mention is a package where those who are interested to actually continue to learn with us, we actually come up with a genius package. We call it genius package because now I think everyone can be a genius. We have also pivoted from being, a very dependent, location dependent, into now a more not independent, right? In terms of
location independent, yes.
Yeah, location independent. Right. And so we are actually bringing the services to you guys online, right? And the services that we used to do face-to-face, where we meet you guys, we try to bring this online, and also the services for you guys. Okay. So one of the things that we are in Equity Tracker, we believe in making decisions based on data, based on facts, right? Not on rumors, not on tips or whatsoever. So we have actually created this platform for investors. Right. And we are trying to bridge the gap between investors, the retail investors, people like you and I, with the professional investors. Because previously, if you want to get fundamental information or financial information from companies, you have to subscribe to softwares like Bloomberg or Reuters, which is going to cost you about 9,000 to 15,000 ringgit a month. Right. And people like us can't afford. So, I mean, for the past 40 years, we have been able to gather all this data and now bring it at a very low cost to retail investors like you and I, so that we too can have the information like the professionals have. All right. So this is one thing that you'll get from the Genius package. And every genius needs to have a sidekick or an assistant. We also provide a portfolio, right? So that whenever you make a trade, all your trades will be recorded into this portfolio so that you're able to manage this, right? And it's very important to know because to have a portfolio, I think yesterday we just had a session on the importance of having a portfolio. So if you missed that, just view our recordings yesterday, right? But it's very important to have portfolio so that we know the direction that we are heading towards our financial objective, all right? And this is where we can also know how to actually change our portfolio or, edit your portfolio so it makes it better and to achieve your objective, all right? Now, if you do not know how to develop a portfolio, don't worry because we're also here for you. We actually have 5 different portfolios for you to follow. Right, we have a 10,000 ringgit portfolio, we have a 50,000 ringgit portfolio, we have a 200,000 ringgit, and the 2 million one as well. Is it, Alvin? Is it 2
Yeah,
million?
yeah.
Yep. So that, even if you have, small money to start off with, you can follow a smaller portfolio. But if you have more money, you can also follow the other portfolios, right? And this is important because this is where you actually see how we actually practice what we preach, right? And the portfolios that we have are all live portfolios. That means they are not just a mock portfolio or demo portfolio. They are real portfolios, right? With real money in it. Okay, again, this is not for investment advice. It's basically to show you how to actually apply the principles that we are teaching. Okay, so this is where you get all the portfolio, and we have started a special COVID-19 portfolio, which is just started this week, so that you can follow us, right? And this is available on our Genius portfolio. Okay, we have also added because we have also got requests for a Sharia portfolio, right? Some, especially our Muslim friends who need a Sharia portfolio, we actually started a 50K Sharia portfolio for you to follow as well. So all of this is available in our Genius package. All right. So one of the other things that you'll be getting also is our monthly research. In fact, this weekend, Saturday, we actually have a session on semiconductors. We're going to dive deep into the session to see which part of the component might be able to benefit from actually COVID-19. All right. So this is where we do our in-depth research, and every month we have these insights, and these insights will also be available to you guys, all right? For those who subscribe to our Genius package. Now, the Genius package, so you can see all the features there. All you need to do, the subscription is only 240 ringgit a month, all right? This is renewed monthly, but if you take a package for a year, then you only need to pay 2,004, which is 200 ringgit a month, right? So you save 480 ringgit if you subscribe for a year, and you get all the things that we have mentioned earlier. All right. So all you need to do is to WhatsApp us at 603-8408 7020
2070.
Sorry,
oh, and also I guess the first 100 subscribers who sign up for the 1-year package get a free T-shirt as well, right?
Yeah. First 100 who subscribe, right? I think it's almost there already. So make sure you subscribe fast.
Yeah.
Right.
But if you want to sign up for a free trial, you can also go to equitytracker.com/free, right? To set up an account.
Yeah. So hopefully you are able to join us in this package so that you are able to also join us every single day, on our Equities Tracker platform, our Equities Tracker Facebook, where we have live session every day, all right, at 8 p.m. Of course, today is special because we have Dr. Michael Lee over here. It's already it's already past 12 right now. So sorry, Dr. Michael. Please join us every day. Just like our Facebook page, all right, and follow us so that you get notifications on our live sessions every single day at 8 p.m. All right. Okay. Thank you for waiting, Dr. Michael. Alvin, do you have any other questions from the audience?
Yeah, actually, we have maybe a couple last few questions. We don't want to keep you up too late. So we have some questions. Which companies or which industries are you seeing that are in that thriving position today? Or what kind of businesses?
Yeah, the most obvious ones are things like, Netflix and Amazon and, the new Disney sort of stream service. So there's a classic example of asynchronous, location independent streaming service or retail service. They're the ones that are easiest to think of because they're so massive, right? Social media companies are also obviously asynchronous and location independent. So those are the ones to think of. In terms of the ones you're able to invest in, it's a bit trickier then because like you were saying earlier on, Alvin, by the time they get there and we know about them, it's probably not the best investment because they're sought after already. So they've already made that move.
So yeah, because we have like or do you see any companies right now in any sector that is really moving from survive to thrive from your experience? And I look at your CV. You worked with a lot of companies as well, some large companies as well. Do you actually kind of see that happening for the bigger companies that they're really trying to pivot?
I think they're always thinking of innovating in a way so that they can become more convenient and give more value to the customer. Often the companies I work with, I haven't consulted using this because this is so new. So usually I I'm helping them with brand strategy or communications or advertising. So that's where my input into the companies are, brand development and that sort of thing. So that's my area of consulting. In terms of using this particular matrix to try and get them, it's it's easy enough, as I mentioned before, by asking a few insightful questions to get them really to think about their business model in terms of time and place, in order to get them to start pivoting. So that would be the way to do it. Or if you are a business owner yourself or an entrepreneur, to start critically analyzing your own business and through those two, simple lenses of time and place. I haven't gone so far as to try and spot companies, like through using your software or anything, to see if you can somehow spot the move from dive to thrive, almost before they get to thrive, because you want to invest at that point when they're still not worth that much.
Yeah. Well, that's our job, right? So we're gonna work out using a framework to see if we can spot any companies that are in. I mean, I think the dive ones are fairly obvious, and the thrive ones. And I guess really where the investment, from the investment viewpoint, would be, you're right? How do we spot those guys that change their strategy to move into a survive and ultimately thrive, right? Okay, one last question. Okay, so this is a final question here. We get
here we go.
Do you think people will change the way they do things, assuming they find a vaccine tomorrow?
That's a great question to finish off.
Are we gonna waste time moving into independent and move back into the old ways, right? That's the question, right? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so when we moved from level 4 lockdown to level 3 and takeaway shops were open again, there were queues outside KFC for like literally 2 to 3 hours. People were like in the cars, so they were still practicing the physical distancing, but there was such a huge demand for the sort of traditional way of doing things, right? So I guess there's what we can call a rebound effect, where people, so there's two things, and this is getting a little bit academic at 12 a.m. in New Zealand. So there's a rebound, there's something called a rebound effect, which is where people do the opposite of what they've been doing. And that's certainly what we've seen happening with the takeaway. But then the other type of effect is called a spillover effect. And that's when some of the habits that you develop spill over into other parts of your life. And so the people that are hoping for this pandemic as a wake-up call to change the way we've been living and to get off the rat race, stop sitting in traffic, do more work, at flexible times, and work remotely from home, those sort of more climate friendly environmental types are hoping for a spillover effect, right? Where some of this forced isolation and remote working will actually rub off and spill over into the rest of our lives post-pandemic. On the other hand, you have the people that are doing the rebound effect, and these are the people that are going, I've been stuck at home, I'm going to go back and buy everything at the fashion store the moment I get a chance, and the moment the shopping malls are open. We don't know which way it's going to go. We don't know if the rebound effect will happen, or the spillover effect will happen. I guess the people that are sort of the traditional capitalists, they're hoping for a rebound effect, right? Because they want that demand to come back and they can catch up on the production that they've lost. But then on the other hand, the environmentalists and the people are hoping for a new way of living, are hoping for the spillover effect. And then the people in your groups, the investors, might be on either side of that sort of continuum, right? So it'll be interesting. I don't know which way it'll go, but it'll be very interesting to watch.
It could be both, right? Could be a rebound and a spillover effect, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You get people saying, I don't want to sit in traffic for 2 hours. And so the way they've been living will spill over into the rest of their life. On the other hand, you could have people going, oh my gosh, I'm a people person. I really need to get out there and go back to the cafes and the restaurants and the shopping malls. And then you see the rebound effect over there.
Yeah. But do you agree that I think businesses should really take a look? I think the quadrant is really a good guide, because right now it may be COVID-19, but in the future we never know what's going to happen, right? And I think this is like a wake-up call for a lot of businesses. And I think that would be really a good guide for those who are, contemplating on where's your business direction is going to go to. And obviously, we all want to thrive, right? And thank you so much, Dr. Michael, for sharing with us the quadrant and your thoughts. Really has been it's been a good guide. I think later we're probably going to do a research on the quadrant, using the quadrant for investments as well, and look which company is on the thriving side, right?
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, stay tuned. So we're gonna do something like that, and then we'll send it over to you. And I guess those who are interested, right? If you guys are interested in the quadrants that Dr. Michael has put up, you okay? We get them to download as a PDF.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll send the links. I'll turn that into a PDF, and I'll add some links to it so that people can read the original article as well.
So you can you can download the materials today via WhatsApp at 603-8408-2070, right? If you guys want to download whatever we've talked about today, it's 603, save this number, 603-8408-2070. Click on number 1, which is English freebies, and you can download what Dr. Michael has shared, right?
Yeah.
Thank you so much again, Dr. Mike, and everyone, all of you who are listening. MBAN, the president is here. All the CEOs who are on board, thank you very much for listening. I hope you guys found it useful. I know it's 12 a.m. your time. Thank you so much for your time again, Dr. Mike. We hope to see you again.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Have a great day or evening. Have a good evening.
All right, thanks.
See you guys.
Thank you guys, Dr. Mike. See you again.
All right.
Good night, everybody.
All right.